Hello. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the latest module for Jackrabbit, the stochastic module. The stochastic indicator is a very popular one, and it is a leading indicator. As such, it is prone to false signals. There are two different types of stochastic. The standard traditional, overbought, oversold, and the crossover style. This version supports both, but as with all Jackrabbit indicators and modules, there is a twist. Let's start by zooming in. Of course, this is TradingView, and I'm using Bitcoin. Stochastic has two lines. The blue line is the fast line, or K line. The cyan teal line is the slow line, or the D line. This has the oversold range, overbought range. I always get those backwards. This is the overbought range. Underneath the red line is the oversold range. Now, normally for a stochastic crossover, anywhere the crossover takes place is a signal. Jackrabbit's version means the crossover must be above the overbought line and below the oversold line. So anything in this area is a void. Of course, the standard is 80 and 20. Now, as I said, normally this has a high propensity for false signals. But because of the way I did the crossovers, you can see it's nowhere near as high of a false signal rate. But let's take a look at the settings. Now, these are typically the default settings that you would normally see. I'm going to change the crossover method to the traditional method. What that means is that both the K and the D line must be above or below the boundaries appropriately. So let's zoom in here. Normally you would use this when you couple it with another indicator. For example, Bollinger bands. A common technique is to use Bollinger bands at the same time as stochastic, where stochastic replaces the RSI. Stochastic and RSI are very similar, and in many places they can be used interchangeably. Whereas RSI is a slower indicator to react to the market, stochastic is a faster reaction time. That may work against it in many times. But as you can see, buy signals are always below the red line. The sell signals are always above the green line. And you can change these boundaries appropriate. For example, I commonly like to use this kind of a setting when I'm working with an ADX indicator. It provides a little more signals, as you can see. Now, if you were to use stochastic to drive your strategy, I heavily recommend a momentum-based indicator similar to that one I used in MACD. But that's a different topic for different discussion. For right now, I'm just going to focus on stochastic. It is a very interesting and very simple indicator to use, and one that's very powerful. The crossovers have a very good history, but as you can see from here, up here, to down here is an automatic loss unless you're using dollar cost averaging in strategy mode. So it's not something you necessarily want to use by itself, although you can with the right circumstances. Of course, you can play around with the different settings to find better combinations. These are the default settings. Well, let's put this back to default. So with the default settings, let's put this up to 23. Did you see it drastically reduces the signals? The longer the length, the more difficult it becomes to cross the 80 or 20 boundaries. So in essence, you're stretching out your frequency. That can be good or bad, depending upon what you're trying to achieve. So you do need to be aware of and carefully test your numbers. You may want to use 25 so you can pick up a few of these low points. But again, it's all part of the testing process. Just be aware that stochastic is generally not used by itself because of it producing a lot of false signals. For example, here it produced an overbought signal here at the low. So something like this you might want to even consider, and I've talked about this before, invert your signals. Now the overbought signal turns into a buy signal. So now, as you can see, by changing one simple thing, we begin to look at the market differently. Now, not all markets are going to work well with this technique. Understand why you use this technique, because it can cost you money if you're not properly prepared for it. Something like this, you would probably want to use a trailing stop loss. Now right here, notice it did go above, but the crossover has to take place above the green line. If both lines go above and then drop down, and the crossover takes place under the green line, it does not count. So that's something to be aware of, and something that a traditional setting may be more appropriate for versus a crossover setting. So let's go to traditional, and you'll see the difference. Still not enough to bump it. Well, I bumped it into a buy signal. So be aware that as you transcend, notice you're not getting very many sell signals now, because the 20 boundary may be a little bit too low for the circumstances. So this could rack up a lot of money for averaging, but the dollar cost averaging module could very easily turn this into a very good profit. For example, let's turn this off. Let's come back up here. Let's put this at 14. So now we're completely default. Now let's load the dollar cost averaging module. Now I'm not going to use a stepping system, but I'm going to use the strategy method. I don't want to accumulate unnecessary positions. I want to simply be able to take the situation and improve upon it without risking a higher budget line. So as you can see, now we have the dollar cost averaging module in place. And for the current framework, it says 5 purchases. And here's the average for that purchase. So this is one way of using the stochastic, even though it is prone to leading signals, to be able to maximize your benefit. And if you're looking to get out early, rather than strategy, you might use your selling point as take profit. And this would profit right here very quickly. But this is set to pure strategy. That way the only thing making the decisions is the stochastic. It's an organic approach to help to maximize an unusual market. And as you can see, it does well. For example, here, normally a step would pick up a position here, but it didn't because there's no buy signal here, but actually a sell signal. So the dollar cost averaging filtered that down for you. So there are things to be aware of and things to watch out for with stochastic. It is a wonderful leading indicator as long as you are aware that it can give false signals, and couple it with either a moving average, dollar cost averaging, or even Bollingers. For example, let's get rid of this. Well, let's unlink it first. Okay, now let's bring in a Bollinger's. Again, I'm not going to do anything special, just straight default, turn on the indicator on indicator. Standard signal line, I'm going to turn off, turn on the chart, and turn off the signal line. Now I'm going to go into the indicator on indicator, and I'm going to pull in the stochastic signal. So now we're going to actually have the combination of Bollinger and stochastic. You're still going to get some losses, that's normal, unless you use dollar cost averaging or inverted signals, or in some way avert some of the negative losses. By itself, this is roughly a 45 to 50% success rate. So if you use a risk-reward ratio of 2 to 1, you're still going to do well. It's not as profitable as the MACD combination, but this combination still does well. And it does have a place for certain markets. Like any tool in your tool chest, understand where it belongs. So, by now you should be getting used to the standard framework for the modulus system, and it should become very easy to figure out modules as you progress. Now we can, for example, with Bollinger, we can make this a little more aggressive. For example, we can take and do a split boundary on Bollinger. Let's do a high and a low. and give it a better outcome. Of course, you can also change this to EMA and make it more reactive. And that will automatically filter out a lot of false signals with very little changes. For example, now we have a high sell point, a low buying point, because we're using Bollinger in a split band system close to what you would expect for a momentum. So there are ways to really tune this and make it a spectacular winner. It's just a matter of how you choose to tune it and what your risk assessment is. And that holds true for every module independently and every module combination. Tuning is everything. And even something as a simple momentum can make the world of difference with any of these indicators. For example, if you wanted to use stochastic, because it is such a wonderful leading indicator, the way you can weed out the false signals with the moving averages, come in here, turn off the signal line, turn on the chart, come down here, set this to momentum, make sure your fast and slow are identical, and I'm going to do a simple 200 EMA momentum, and I always prefer a high-low combination. I just find it produces very good results. So here you have basic momentum, the classic, you've seen this before, nothing over the top. By itself, there it is. Now let's pull in the stochastic line. So we want to turn this on. We want to find stochastic signal line. And now you have a world of difference. You have a very nice, very simple process that's going to produce some very good results. Buy low, sell high. Now again, momentum is going to filter out a lot of these, and we can make these tunings even more. For example, let's make sure we are in the crossover state and really filter out some noise. There we go. Again, starting would be a 45 to 50, but the combination of the EMA 200 momentum takes this up to about a 55% win rate. So if you have a 2-to-1 win ratio, or profit-loss ratio, or risk-reward ratio, as they often call it, where for every 2 wins you can lose 1 trade, you're going to make money all the time with this, short of a market apocalypse. So there are ways that you can really take and beef this up and take advantage of some unusual situations. If you are familiar with the technique and you understand inversion, then you can really bring it up to the next level of understanding with inversion. And that does have a major impact on how things will work. Again, you're not going to win every trade, only the average of trades. So when you look at your charts, be sure you understand inversion, because it is a difficult concept that can lead to losses unless you properly understand it. I personally am not a fan of it. I prefer the traditional below momentum to purchase, above momentum to sell, but inversion is a good technique for the right market condition. So as long as you understand that, you will have a spectacularly very good profit basis. Again, you're not going to win 100%. That's not realistic. But for the most part, this is a good, solid system. Right here, this sell signal, this brought home a nice little profit. And it got out before this dip. So let's go back to where the profit is. Now, of course, these sell signals here would have all triggered first, but still, this is not bad. Be aware of the circumstances. This might have caused a loss here, but a little bit of work, you could probably weed this out. For example, one of the things I like to do is confirmation bias. And again, you'll see this in the MACD line. MACD version 1 and MACD version 4. Set the fast moving line to SMWA and set the algorithm to the 37 rule. Now you'll see before in other areas and also signal deviation of 1%. Or I put the SWMA in the top one and the momentum in a confirmation. Either way works. You don't have to have a specific weight because they both work together in this situation. So you can use the SWMA to confirm momentum, or you can use momentum to confirm the SWMA. There you have it. It filters out all of the risks. Now let's go to a 1 hour to get a bigger picture. And as you can see, visually you can see some opportunities, but the algorithm isn't finding anything it would want to get into. So I would reverse it to see if maybe it's seeing something I'm not. But for the standpoint of the stochastic, you can see just how you can tune this quite nicely. And the higher the time frame, the more likely it will function by itself. For example, if you were trading manually, purchasing right here and selling right here would be a profit. You would automatically ignore this one visually, just because it's not that big of a drop. So there are ways to use this manually as well as automatically. Take the time, look at the chart, try different components, and make sure you take a little bit of time to really play with the numbers and tweak it. Until next time.